Hello, folks. Welcome to Dirge for the Charlatans, part 53. 53 shows, that's right. And we're still standing. Here's a nice quote from Brendan Behan, the guy that wrote Borstal Boy, and the two great plays, The Hostage and The Queer Fellow. All right, Brendan Behan, a fine Irishman, was banned from the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City, even though he was Irish and a great writer. I am not fond of police anywhere, in Ireland or in France, in England either. I have heard no good reports of the New York police, though most of them are of Irish descent. Now, of course, I don't think Brendan means that literally, but you think about these quotes as you listen to the rest of the show and the so-called criminal justice system. Did you know that lawyers are not liable for falsehoods they present in court or court papers and motions, etc.? Why is this so? Because lawyers set the rules. Don't you agree with your investigative reporter, Tiffany, that if a lawyer is proven to malign and slander somebody in court and tell lies, and it's provable that they should be able to be sued? Jack Henry Abbott on prison guards. I have never seen an indifferent pig. I have seen lazy and unconcerned pigs, but never an objective and indifferent pig. The lazy ones are like magnanimous kings who carelessly overlook slights and arbitrarily pass out mercies, but will, at a whim, suddenly rise up angry and take it all back, relegating everyone to hell. Always, always, every guard in prison is a tyrant, and prisoners are his subjects. Is that the right of government founded by free man? I think that applies to a lot of people in power. That if they have an arbitrary ability to harm other people, there should always be safeguards. School staff, school administrators, like in New York City, they say that they're going to go after the people that covered up the teacher that was abusing students, or what about the cops that covered up for the cop who was threatening and harassing, etc., and doing all kinds of things to his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or something, and then he ends up killing her? By the way, congratulations, if I'm being facetious, to the state legislature for all the nincompoopery that they committed in the last few weeks, including the fact that they've taken away the power from the New York City police chief to go after bad cops, and they've left it to a commission, making it much harder to have anything done. Okay? Jack Henry Abbott, men with low intelligence do not become enraged over injustice. They question nothing and accept everything said and done to them. Men with low intelligence do not become enraged over injustice. They question nothing and accept everything said and done to them. Oh. Why is Nick Tartaglione, rogue Briarcliff cop, according to my sources, and you'd be surprised where they pop up? Everywhere I go, somebody's got something to tell me. And I appreciate all of you people that are coming up to me from Hastings to all the way up into middle of Connecticut now, telling me tales. All right? Could it be that police officer Nicky Nasty Tartaglione is attempting, get this folks, to get back on the Mount Vernon police force That's where he started. Remember, he went from Mount Vernon to Yonkers, and according to a police source, he had to leave Yonkers because of illegal activity involving him and his family. Then he went up to Paulding, and of course, Briarcliff hired him. 4 places in about 4.5 years. Has Nicky Tartaglione been told by putative police chief Ron Trainum and or other Briarcliff Village personnel, such as Lynn McCrum or Mayor Austin, to get out as soon as possible, because eventually the public awareness of all of Nick's misconduct revealed by your investigative reporter on Dirge for the Charlatan shows will become too much even for Briarcliff, which never charged Ron Langer, remember. Even Briarcliff won't be able to cover it up. Remember, Nick Tartaglione stands accused of harassing and worse of a 26-year-old woman at the scene of an accident, of coercing her through unethical means to give her her phone number under duress, and then harassing her, her mother, her stepfather on the phone for months. And then Detective Pugliese very possibly filed a false report on this, if Trustee Peter Burrow is to be believed. Said false report by Detective Pugliese exonerates, according to Peter Burrow's description of it, this report exonerates the miscreant Tartaglione. Mayor Keith Austin, of course, continues to cover this up. Nick Tartaglione also threatened me, sent me to the hospital, and told me he is connected to the mob on 3/25/97. Nick Tartaglione stalked me with a witness witnessing this on May 17, 1997. Yet at the behest of ADA Lynn Farrell, putative judge Fred Weinstein issued an order of protection against me in regard to this rogue cop, Nick Tartaglione. Anyway, Nicky Boy told the young woman at the scene of the accident that the reason that he left Mount Vernon and Yonkers police departments was because there was too much crime and it was too dangerous. Poor baby. Could it be that in Yonkers and Mount Vernon there are too many blacks and Latinos who emasculated Nicky even though he had the gun? From an eyewitness. How about the following in regard to the textbook psyche of rogue cop Nick Tartaglione? Apparently, Nick, according to this source, and some other reprobate cops were flashing, this is a while back, their police badges to get freebies at a notorious strip joint in New York City in Queens. I believe the name of the place is Goldfingers or some such. Even though they were from Westchester, they're flashing their badges or doing it metaphorically. But even in this less than wholesome, I should say, environment, according to my source, Nick Tartaglione and his other debauched cops who were on the take overdid it and made such ludicrous demands and behaved so abominably that the extortionate, venal, iniquitous cops were given the bum's rush from the strip joint. They were asking for too much, lap dancing and stuff like that. I wonder if Nick has flashed his Briarcliff police badge to get into other strip joints. Aren't you proud of that, people in Briarcliff? You don't know what that badge has touched, possibly. So when Nicky finally leaves, I would hope that they clean and exhume all the stuff that he wore and his badge and everything. Back to Andy O'Rourke Jr. Remember Andy? Finally, after months and months of refusing to report any of the wrongful acts of Andrew O'Rourke Jr., the Gannett newspapers on July 24th, 1997, reported that landlord O'Rourke Jr. was arrested for failing to pay housing code violations that occurred at his 11 Madison Avenue home in Ossining. Ever supercilious Andy O'Rourke Jr. denied that he had been arrested and hung up on the newspaper reporter. Of course, the Gannett article got several crucial items wrong. Now, this is important. I guess it is too hard to go out and really get the news, because they must have done this basically by phone calls. Remember, folks, your investigative reporter brought David Wilson of the Gannett newspapers to 11 Madison Avenue in Ossining. And David Wilson met the victims of landlord Andy O'Rourke Jr. Wilson was in their cold rooms that at best had a space heater. David Wilson himself told me that the reason the DA, Janine Pirro's office, under the auspices of the notorious ADA Lynn Farrell, in this case, refused to prosecute the case of the October 21st, 1996 assault of Puerto Rican war veteran and hero and medal winner, Purple Heart, Silver Star, Gus Lopez by Andy O'Rourke Jr. with channel lock pliers, no less, which assault sent Gus Lopez to the Phelps Hospital with a bleeding head wound. The reason, according to Wilson, that D.A. Pirro's office refused to pursue this case was because it was a possible felony. He admitted that. He brought it up. And David Wilson felt that the DA's office under Janine Pirro and ADA Lynn Farrell, a woman, they did not want to prosecute a possible felony charge against Westchester County CEO Andy O'Rourke's son, Andy Jr. Why? I thought the right-wing Republicans were for law and order. Isn't that what they tell us? But of course, as we see recently with this right-wing zealot Giuliani there in the city, he told his office, according to the sheriff's department in New York City, told the law enforcement people to stay away for a couple of months from giving tickets in an Orthodox Jewish section in New York City. And now Giuliani's trying to run away from that. Imagine that. Because they rioted, thousands. And as Al Sharpton says, think about it if it had been a bunch of black people. What do you think? But David Wilson, after promising me and the beleaguered tenants he would write an article about this sordid treatment of tenants Gus Lopez, Ted Tillison, and Dennis McMahon downstairs, and Janet Gongi, Bangu Musoko, and Ikomi Gongi upstairs, well, David Wilson refused to write about all this. Even after, according to David Wilson, attorney Joseph Locascio, Andy O'Rourke Jr.'s attorney, told Wilson that the tenants were a bunch of, quote, animals, unquote. Animals indeed. Who is the animal here? What kind of a landlord, as Andy O'Rourke did, doesn't provide heat for months at a time? That's what Andy O'Rourke was guilty of. What kind of a landlord does not instill a boiler for his freezing tenants? Remember I said if you don't have the heat on for one night, it drives you crazy? Imagine for weeks and weeks and months of no heat. It's inhuman in the middle of a brutally frigid winter, no less. What kind of a landlord has his basement condemned by Con Ed due to asbestos-bearing materials and nothing is done, so that the tenants have to go in and pay? I believe it was $810 to have it removed. What kind of a landlord repeatedly harasses his tenants? I'll tell you what kind of a landlord. The kind of a landlord who's going to get away with it due to the corruption of the DA's office and the Ossining police force and the Ossining government, which is allegedly Democrat. Democrat. What kind of an ADA does as Lynn Farrell did in all this? refused to prosecute O'Rourke or even grant the 2 black African women tenants upstairs an order of protection, which they pleaded with Lynn Farrell to get, Lynn Farrell's office. And then I made note of that on a Dirge for the Charlatan shows. And after that, according to Janet Gongi and another eyewitness, Andy O'Rourke Jr. shoved Janet on one occasion, and on another occasion, he kicked in their apartment door. As a result of this outrageous kicking in of Janet Gongi's door, hundreds of dollars worth of damage was done to her electronic hardware, such as a VCR, a TV set, and a stereo. And the door was broken in its lock. According to Janet Gongi, attorney Joseph Locascio was present. Amazing, huh? When Andy O'Rourke Jr. kicked in her door. Yet this attorney Locascio had the temerity to term the tenants animals. But we know all about victimizing the victim, don't we, people? It goes on all the time. Animals. This in and of itself should have impelled David Wilson to write an article just on the racism exhibited by Locascio alone. Remember, three of the tenants were black Africans. One of the tenants was a Puerto Rican war hero, all right, decorated, and 2 other fine alleged Caucasian gentlemen, all right? So there's racism alone should have impelled Wilson to write the article, and I kept asking him to write the article. What do you think happened? On 1/21/97, a Gannett newspaper editor by the name of, she identified herself as Gail Gorman, told your investigative reporter, Clay Tiffany, get this folks, for the 2nd day in a row, that the reason the Gannett newspaper was not writing about all of this abominable mistreatment of these wonderful tenants, lack of heat, assault, shoving, threatening, harassing, refusing to install a boiler, etc., was, according to Gail Gorman, remember this name, next time you see it in the newspaper, she told me that the witnesses, which means the tenants, refused to talk to the newspaper. Now this is serious business. This was patently untrue, as the reason I got wind of this story was because the tenants had gone to the newspaper in the fall of '96, October of 1996, according to them, and they were given short shrift by the newspaper. The tenants then came to your investigative reporter as they had seen my Dirge for the Charlatan shows and knew that I would try to get their story out to you, the public, and that I would not cover up this story of Andy O'Rourke Jr.'s horrific treatment of 6 wonderful tenants, because I am not beholden to the powerful, such as Westchester County CEO Andy O'Rourke. Remember, that was around the time that the newspaper was pushing Andy O'Rourke, the county CEO, for a state judgeship. Nice, huh? Think about it. It could happen to you. And why did Gail Gorman, a putative editor, object to my possibly taping her reply? Because she said, oh, are you taping me? I'm going to hang up. After she said to me for the 2nd day in a row that the reason that they weren't writing about this was because the tenants refused to talk to the newspaper, which was a patent lie, she was objecting to my possibly taping her. Now, I have a question. I guess newspapers never tape anybody. So next time you watch real newspaper reporters with their tape recorders at a presidential press conference or some such, or talking to a ball player or something, that's not really a tape recorder. Or is it, Gail Gorman? By the way, don't newspapers quote people? Don't they? What if reporters were told they couldn't quote people because basically Gail Gorman didn't want to be quoted? Why? How dare you lie about these wonderful tenets, Gail Gorman? Back to the 724. Now that's serious, what I just told you, by the way. Back to the, that's not the first time the Gannett papers have covered up stuff. Back to the 7/24/97 Gannett article and its unforgivable mistakes. Now remember, they didn't write this article until July 24th. The article said the three men were countersuing for their security deposit, estimated at $1,700. All they would have had to do was do a cursory bit of investigating, and they would have found that the truth is the three men, tenants downstairs, were countersuing Andy O'Rourke Jr. for over $11,000. Now, is $11,000 a little different than $1,700? Which included back rent for no heat for months at a time, asbestos removal, $810, $2,500 approximately for boiler installation and other work done by the great, and I mean great, Terrytown plumbing inspector Adrian Dominguez. Adrian Dominguez has come up exceptionally tall in this sordid affair. After sitting through 2 sessions of the landlord-tenant court, here are some observations. At which court sessions I didn't see any Gannett newspaper reporters. I wonder why. And of course that little rag by that guy that calls me a communist, we won't even mention the name of the paper, they were nowhere to be seen. That shill for the powerful. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Andy O'Rourke Jr. chewed gum every time he testified and was not chastised by the putative judge, Shapiro. What a prissy, smug, self-satisfied, but essentially devoid of masculinity voice and demeanor Andy Jr. has. George Pires and Laura Schuler from the Austin Building Department gave forth item after item that any fair judge, note I say fair judge, would have to deem demonstrable evidence that the tenants were appallingly mistreated by Andy O'Rourke Jr., landlord, and thus the tenants are due heavy damages. Adrian Dominguez, whom the tenants had to pay to install a boiler, etc., so that they could finally have heat. Don't these human beings deserve heat in a building that they're paying rent in? Don't they? Or is the fact that 3 of them are from Africa and are black, one of them's Puerto Rican, and the other 2 guys are not living on Easy Street, does that mitigate if you're a right-wing Republican? Does it? Does it? After freezing for weeks and weeks, Adrian Dominguez came in and saved these tenants by installing the boiler and doing other work. This guy, Adrian Dominguez, was tremendous, outstanding, superb on the stand. As to why he installed the boiler, Dominguez said in court, quote, very possibly that they could have frozen to death if the boiler had not been installed the day it was. Quote, very possibly that they could have frozen to death. Remember, they get much mileage out of this so-called right to life issue. Doesn't the right to life exist after you're born? Huh? These Republicans, for the most part, they don't seem to care, do they? You know, about half the people working, people in America are not insured for health insurance. Every industrial country in the world, except for the United States, has universal health care. Where's Cardinal O'Connor on this issue? Because I see Cardinal O'Connor's got a big problem with the Catholic Teachers Union head. And it looks like they framed them. To Catholic teachers make $29,000 on average versus $63,000 for public school teachers in Westchester. And yet, it appears to me that they framed this guy. Nice. Nice. You know Cardinal O'Connor, the guy that when he came to New York, registered as an independent and said that he'd always been registered that way because he wasn't, the implication was he wasn't political, even though this putative Christian wrote a book a little late in the game, 1973, defending the Vietnam War. And guess what? Cardinal O'Connor was caught up in a fib. What a surprise, a clergyman, not being what he portrays himself. As Wayne Barrett, the great Village Voice reporter, went to Pennsylvania, Scranton, I believe, or wherever, and found out that Cardinal O'Connor had previously been registered as, what a surprise, a Republican. Anyway, Dominguez went on to state about Landlord O'Rourke, quote, he could have lost the whole building if Dominguez hadn't done what he did. The day that he did. Attorney Spector, who was from Attorney Locascio's firm, represented landlord Andy O'Rourke Jr., and he was right out of Charles Dickens in his questioning, his visage, his demeanor. Outside, Andy Jr. said to me after one of these court sessions, quote, this is Andy O'Rourke Jr. And I filed with the Ossining police. Do you think they and the ADA's office are going to do anything? Poke it up your A, and you know the rest of that word. You know, Andy O'Rourke Jr. has like a fixation on homosexuality. What do you think that's all about? Anybody got any suggestions? Projection? Wishful thinking? Anyway, he also went on to tell me that when my father becomes a judge, I hope you appear before him because he's going to get you. Just another reason why Andy O'Rourke Sr. should not be a judge. Unfortunately, Judge Ed Shapiro, as I mentioned, presided over this case. Judge Shapiro seemed to favor Attorney Spector and even suggested strategy to Attorney Spector. What a surprise. Judge Shapiro incredibly did not give a delay to the black African male, Ikomi Gongi, who even though Ikomi sent a message and substantiation that he was ill in Pennsylvania, thus he couldn't make it that night. He had very important pictures for his and his sister's case and also for the other three tenants. Yet this black African male's perfectly legitimate, according to the people that I respect, perfectly legitimate excuse, Shapiro said, go ahead, without him. Remember, Judge Ed Shapiro is the one whom Linda Mangano said an Ossining cop let Shapiro go even though he was DWI. Now this is Shapiro likes, Mangano likes Shapiro. Okay, she said an Ossining cop told her that he let Judge Shapiro go even though Judge Shapiro was DWI. For you dare children. Judge Shapiro is accused by an Ossining women of saying that the Irish Cultural Center Terra, about the Irish Cultural Center Terra at an Elks Club affair. We don't want the low-class Irish from the Bronx and Queens to come up to Briarcliff on the weekends to get drunk. How ironic. if you know Ed Shapiro. Judge Shapiro is accused by a fine, pulchritudinous black woman of racist treatment in court, where he did such things as say to her, "I'm tired of you people," meaning blacks, because that's what all the tenants were in, I believe it's 45 Spring Street, a slum tenement, coming up here and complaining. "I'm tired of you people coming up here and complaining." Then Judge Shapiro praised one of the slumlords at 45 Spring Street. I believe the guy's name is DeMarco. Judge Shapiro, who is said by many, including his friend Marie Gagliardi and others, to have had a very indiscreet, improper relationship with court clerk Maureen Hunt, even though Judge Shapiro was then and is now married to a superior to him person, his wife. Judge Shapiro did not seem happy to see your investigative reporter taking copious notes at this case. And by the way, my friend Mrs. Murphy gave me a book a while back, Britain's War Machine in Ireland. It goes on to this day. I met a friend, James, who's a bartender at a bar in the city and in Westchester, Irish lad, who told me he had his skull fractured by the Royal Ulster Constabulary, okay, the British police up there in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. Remember, the British military was praised by that boob, that buffoon, Buffano, the former mayor of Briarcliff. But we're on to another subject. The other day, Tuesday, July 28th, 1997, I had an appointment to see Detective Sullivan of the Ossining Police Force to show Detective Sullivan incontrovertible proof that a crime had been committed by the pit bull, the woman who curses and gets away with it at public meetings in Ossining, Linda Mangano, the woman who, according to my sources and according to Linda Mangano herself, she's proud of the fact that she uses the F word to some poor secretary in the Ossining village government. Why doesn't Ossining prosecute her for harassment? I've been told they have tapes of her cursing the village officials. I don't think that's, I don't think that's kosher. Do you? All right? I have evidence. She told me herself that she illegally hooked up water from one house she owns to another. That's against the law in Ossining, and I have an eyewitness to attest to that. All right? She told me herself that she had one of her minions send love letters that I wonder how she got them, and other personal letters from Paul Whittlesee's to the Whittlesey house in Chappaqua, which is harassment through the mail, and just recently she started harassing me through the mail. Linda Mangano, pit bull for the right rabid wing in Ossining. Okay? Anyway, Detective Sullivan came out of the detective's room with his pal, Sergeant Riley, the very corpulent Sergeant Riley. Sergeant Riley had a video camera on his beefy shoulder, and he was pointing said camera at me as he waddled around following me and harassing me, even though I told the obese Sergeant Riley to stop shadowing me and leave me alone. Isn't there a weight rule in Ossining? By the way, previously, Sergeant Greenan on Saturday, July 19th, 1997, had refused to allow me to submit a brief written complaint about this crime to the Ossining police. Talk about police state. On July 28th, 1997, incredibly, Detective Sullivan refused to accede to my request to go to a room where I could show him the evidence alone. Rather, Detective Sullivan insisted on allowing Sergeant Riley, or Detective Riley, to follow me around with the intention of harassing and annoying me and intimidating me. Besides having to endure Detective Riley's unwanted, gross, fleshy body constantly in too close proximity to me, Detective Riley had the video camera pointed at me, intending to further harass and annoy me as I repeatedly, even though I repeatedly asked Detective Riley to desist from stalking me with his video camera. no less, on his beefy shoulders. Why did Detective Sullivan say as justification for not even examining the evidence, quote, I read the police report, which contained a lie by the culprit. In other words, because the culprit denied the crime, Detective Sullivan was unwilling to entertain the possibility that there could be evidence that would prove the culprit, Linda Mangano, to be lying. Fascinating, huh? And this is the same village. They have tapes, videotapes at meetings. It's unbelievable. The woman brags about cursing at meetings. She calls up and harasses village employees and brags to me that one woman is upset with the F word. We know what that is. And so she uses it over and over. Who's protecting her? The Empress has no clothes, if you know what I mean. I mean, she's like a dumb minor league, very minor league, J. Edgar Hoover that tries to build a book on these people and then intimidate them. She bragged to me how she's she's procuring parking permits, and she asked me if I knew anybody that wants one. I don't know if she's selling them or not, but I think that that's not exactly kosher. Can I use the word kosher in a show that mentions Detective Riley? Inside joke. Let's get back to why Detective Riley was trying to harass and intimidate me. It appears that when I have been previously talking about wife beating in connection with the Ossining police force, Detective Sullivan and Detective Riley both seem to be worried that I was referring to Detective Riley. Interesting? No? The truth is, there's more than one Ossining cop that's alleged to have been a wife beater. Detective Riley is one of those Ossining cops who has been accused of wife beating and other activities of a very unsavory nature. One of my sources for the allegation of wife beating by Detective Riley, get this folks, happens to be from within the Ossining police community. Get it? This personage was called down more than once in regard to alleged wife beating by Detective Riley, as were other Ossining police. If true, why has Detective Riley been able to evade prosecution by DA Janine Pirro's office and by ADA Lynn Farrell in particular? Are we sensing a pattern here? Do ADA Lynn Farrell and DA Janine Pirro have separate rules for cops? Isn't wife beating a serious crime even when the assailant is a police officer? Because I know of another Ossining cop whose ex-wife has a sordid story to tell about a massive cover-up by law enforcement concerning her Ossining cop ex-husband beating her up repeatedly with nothing done by the Ossining police. This woman also has alleged that her ex-husband, still an Ossining cop, on one occasion put a gun to his head and threatened suicide in full view of various witnesses, including at least one member of the Ossining police force. Yet this guy was not prosecuted for any of the above. Why? Why did Detective Sullivan say to me about this shocking stuff, quote, that's none of your business, that's police department business, unquote? How do you in the audience feel about such alleged goings-on? Is not a cop who puts his gun to his head and threatens suicide a compromised cop? Should this cop be allowed to be a cop after this? What about the Ossining cop or cops who was or were a witness to this gun-to-the-head episode. Why did they not report this to the DA's office? If the DA's office was apprised of this gun-to-the-head incident, what was done? What was not done? I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but think about what I'm saying. Throw in the ex-wife's allegations about her having been beaten by this still arsoning cop, and if all the allegations are true, isn't there a massive cover-up here? All over the U.S., there appear to be law enforcement people that are wife beaters. In fact, wife beating by cops is such a prevalent thing that police representatives are trying to change a federal gun control law which states that retroactively people convicted of at least a misdemeanor domestic violence offense cannot legally possess a firearm. Now, if they violate the domestic violence law in the misdemeanor or above category, they can no longer operate a firearm. Apparently, more than a few police and law enforcement people have been convicted of at least a misdemeanor domestic violence offense, which means that their careers are in jeopardy if they could not carry a gun. Why should cops get special treatment from this law? Particularly when cops and law enforcement people have more occasion to be in situations that require self-control for the public's safety than most other people convicted of domestic violence, misdemeanor or above offenses. In other words, they have more occasion to lose, to really do some damage because they're the ones that are armed all the time. A frightening thought, isn't it? Look at how possibly two arsoning cops got away with wife beating if their accusers, and I notice I say plural, are to be believed. Within the last 5 years or so, the arsoning cop who held a gun to the head and threatened suicide, according to my sources, also committed spousal physical abuse against his ex-wife. According to various witnesses shoved his ex-wife to the ground in Shrub Oak. This is just within the last 5 years or so. At least, because the gun to the head was approximately 1984, all right? At least 2 calls from witnesses, recidivism, ring a bell? At least 2 phone calls from witnesses, according to my source, were made to the Yorktown police regarding this present arsoning cop shoving his ex-wife to the ground, to the street. Nice, huh? And this guy's got a gun. Make you feel good? How do you feel, Walter Brooks, out there? How do you people in the black community feel, huh? How do you people in the white working class communities feel? And even the people up on the hill. Because a rogue cop is a rogue cop is a rogue cop. Excuse me, Gertrude Stein. Why didn't D.A. Janine Pirro prosecute this pusillanimous arsoning cop? I believe Detective Sullivan lives in Yorktown, so it's a good bet that Detective Sullivan is also aware of this vile activity, which is only part of a recidivist pattern by an arsoning cop. So this is probably another reason why Detective Sullivan conspired with the oversized, porcine Detective Riley to try to coerce me, into silence about such topics as wife beating by arsoning cops. By the way, did you see that because of all the negative publicity that Bill Cosby has received regarding his possible attempt to hide his having fathered a young woman 23 years ago with a white woman while Cosby was married to his black wife, Mr. Family Values, Al Pirro, husband of Janine Pirro, Al Pirro is now saying he will take a DNA test to determine if he is the father of Jacqueline Marciano, age 14, as a result of a sexual encounter with Jessica Lynn Marciano, even though Al Pirro has been married to Janine Pirro since, I believe it's 1975. You do the math. 14 and 15 minus 1997, and they were married in 1975. Get it? Of course, in the past, Al Pirro has refused to cooperate at all in finding out whether he is the girl's father. Only because of an intrepid decision by an Indiana court. Remember, Indiana is the place that convicted that sauvage of rape, Mike Tyson. Isn't it fascinating how these so-called moralists, these talk show sports guys and all, and et cetera, and the call-in people and all, the alleged sports writers, they're more exercised over him biting the ear of a fellow fighter than they were about the rape of a black woman. Why? Is Al Pirro being forced to come out of the woodwork and take a DNA test because of the decision? I think so, because I think the decision is going to require him to take it, so his alleged offer to take one is not really what it seems. What a surprise. Also, the Cosby case has shown that DA Janine Pirro's PR people, and don't think she doesn't have public relations people, that Al Pirro's refusal to acknowledge his possible 14-year-old daughter, rather a long time not to support your daughter or acknowledge her, isn't it? Where are you feminists out there? Where are you feminists out there chastising Janine and Al Pirro? Where are you? Oh, don't wake them up. They're the same place they are with the Paula Jones thing. And by the way, how come the sports writers aren't getting all over Marv Albert? Did you see the woman whose list he was on? Do you think Marv? Oh, boy. I'll be talking about that one next show. Anyway, let's get back to this thing, and I think this stuff's going to come back to haunt Janine Pirro, who definitely has aspirations for higher political office. Remember, her husband, Janine Pirro's husband, is being investigated by the federal government regarding accusations by former Yonkers Planning Commissioner Michael Calvi that Al Pirro paid Calvi a $5,000 check to facilitate a 10-screen theater deal in Yonkers. The check exists. The reason that Pirro says he gave him Calvi the check is weak, in my opinion. How about you? Remember, DA Janine Pirro has been chastised by the New York Times in their April 17th, 1997 issue. Quote, she, meaning DA Janine Pirro, has yet to prosecute major cases of municipal corruption or organized crime. She has yet to prosecute major cases of municipal corruption. Remember, Al Pirro cuts deals with municipality representing such people as Donald Trump, and she's not going after major organized crime, prosecuting. Remember, Al Pirro represented interests that wanted to lobby the New York State Legislature, remember all you dare kiddies, to allow smoking the perfidious deadly drug tobacco in restaurants. Remember, DA Janine Pirro refused to prosecute Portchester cop Mark Bracchio, who on February 19th, 1997, shot 13 rounds at an unarmed joyriding in a stolen van 15-year-old Angelo Spasta, and critically wounding Angelo Spasta. Janine Pirro had the gall to note that there were 3 rounds. Gee, there are 3 rounds. He only shot 13, Janine. in the Portchester cop Mark Bracchio's semi-automatic 9mm Beretta. D.A. Pirro stated, quote, "If the police are not able to defend themselves, how can they defend the rest of us?" So a cop is allowed to fire 13 rounds at an unarmed 15-year-old child and critically wound the boy, and D.A. Janine Pirro does nada. Remember, D.A. Janine Pirro's husband's clients or business associates have helped her raise at least 1/5 of the private donations to her campaign treasury, which I believe is over $1 million already and climbing. Included in that list is notorious womanizer Donald Trump. Just dumped his last wife, bragged about the fact that if he'd stayed married to her for a little longer, she'd be entitled to more money. What a fine guy. And other developers such as John Halpern. Remember the GM property in North Terrytown, Sleepy Hollow. Remember that former Westchester County DA Carl Vergari labels D.A. Pirro a liar and political opportunist. Remember that D.A. Pirro and ADA Lynn Farrell and the Ossining police have covered up all the misdeeds of Andy O'Rourke Jr. Remember that even though Lebanese, Janine Pirro has never criticized Israel for having legalized torture of the Palestinians, fellow Arabs. Remember that Janine Pirro has never criticized the sleazy Senator Al D'Amato for his attempts to intercede on behalf of mafia dons who were guilty of murder, extortion, drug dealing, etc. Remember that Al Pirro has represented an alleged mob-connected carding firm. Take a breath, and on to Kathy Pacquiana. Besides the obvious lack of qualifications of Kathy Pacquiana as candidate for the Ossining Town Board, besides the fact that Kathy Pacquiana walked out of her husband for decades, Ernie Pacquiana, and the 2 school-age children to live out of wedlock with a troll like Howard Penn on Law Road in Briarcliff, okay? Besides the fact that Kathy Pacquiana objected to Briarcliff's being associated with the words "Stop Apartheid" against the racist, genocidal regime in South Africa. As reported in the British press, by the way, the South African Truth Commission recently has made public, get this folks, now this is remember she had a problem with those 2 words, "Stop Apartheid." Now listen to these words, listen to what's been revealed. Some of the perfidious practices of the white apartheid regime that Kathy Pacquiana did not want to criticize, the apartheid South African secret police ran drug smuggling operations. Sound familiar? CIA, Contras, cocaine, inner cities. The apartheid South African government aided scientists who were trying to develop drugs. Get this, folks. Get this. Talk about a Holocaust. Get this. To sterilize the black population in South Africa and to kill black leaders. This is what they were trying, this is what has been found out, made public by the Truth Commission over there in South Africa. The South African apartheid regime secret police manufactured, get this there, folks, ecstasy, mandrax, and other drugs. This is a government that was defended by that vile New York Post, run by that Rupert Murdoch. They manufactured ecstasy, mandrax, and other drugs, and then flew them to London and sold them for cash, as all drug dealers do. Why didn't the Gannett papers cover this? Let's see, why? I guess that's a rhetorical question. Back to the farce of Kathy Pacquiana seeking to be a councilwoman for the town of Ossining. All my animal rights brothers and sisters, get ready, baby. Get ready. Pay close attention. Kathy Pacquiana has been observed and seen ostentatiously accoutred in a $10,000 Russian lynx coat in public. How many animals were killed, Russian lynx, so that Kathy Pacquiana, according to my sources, can be wearing an approximately $10,000 fur coat, Russian lynx coat. Okay, you animal rights people out there, my PETA brothers and sisters? Can you believe that this boorish, swinish, tasteless act of Kathy Pacquiana is rewarded by the Democratic Party in having her run as a town council person? According to a family source, Howard Penn, Kathy Pacquiana's new husband, wears a $15,000 watch. $15,000. I mean, can you believe that these people are, that they're Democrats? She's running as a Democrat? And quite possibly that watch, according to a family source, might have been paid for by Ernie Pacquiana's money. Anyway, I think that Kathy Penn's true party is one that accentuates arrivistes, racists, and bloodthirstiness. On to the fact that just recently the Briarcliff School Board, led by Joan Austin, has named the Briarcliff High School track, paid for by taxpayers, after Joe Coleman, former track coach and history teacher. I remember Joe Coleman, who calls himself Jewish, in the late 1980s, telling me that at Briarcliff High School, quote, now get this quote by this teacher, former teacher, "My people," meaning Jewish students, "are the best students at Briarcliff High School. My people are the best students at Briarcliff High School." Joe Coleman alleging that Jewish students are the best students at Briarcliff High School. I was highly insulted by this racist statement by Joe Coleman. How about you? Does the concept self-fulfilling prophecy pertain here? In other words, would not such a racist mentality cause Joe Coleman to accentuate on behalf of, quote, his people, unquote, i.e. Jewish students? And you know how that would mean for the other students. How did I, a non-Jew, get a 95 in world history? Joe Coleman. Yeah. How did it come to pass that in a former class at Briarcliff High School, according to a newspaper reporter who was in that class when Joe Coleman was a teacher, of approximately, this guy did a survey, or whatever, 1/3 Catholic, 1/3 Protestant, and 1/3 Jewish students, exactly half the national merit winners were Protestant and half Jewish. Get it? And that was before the influx of Asian students, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, etc., etc. All of these groups have had outstanding students at Briarcliff High School, which, of course, we know does Joe Coleman. Many years, the students at Briarcliff High School with the highest SATs, etc., have been students who belong to Eastern religions. Yet Joe Coleman made the racist remark, "My people are the best students." Tell that to Cal Berkeley, where Asian students proliferate. I think they're over 50%. Cal Berkeley has a very fair, stringent admissions policy. By the way, Joe, is it genetic, this academic superiority? According to you. Remember, the Nazis tried this ploy. The Nazis. See, folks, those guys with 3 teeth out there in places like Idaho, they're not the only racial supremacists. I won't even go into the fact that it would be very revealing to see just how Joe Coleman identifies who is a Jew. What with intermarriage between Jews and others being 50% or over for a number of years. Another fact is too esoteric for this show. Joe Coleman also was a pusillanimous soul who once refused to pen an endorsement of equal rights for female track athletes at a Westchester high school. When I expressed amazement at this timorous behavior by Joe Coleman to a renowned, and I mean renowned, girls' high school coach, probably the best in the last two decades, she said, quote, "What did you expect of that pansy?" Various top-notch students with exceptional SATs have all told me that Joe Coleman favored boys over girls in the classroom. This was common knowledge. I don't have time to tell you how an Oriental student who went to one of the best schools in the country and had the highest SATs explained this. By the way, I think that the track should have been named after the Ryan family that had something that probably no other family in the U.S. had: 3 boys that ran under 4:20 in the mile. But then again, they were Irish Catholic. Thank you very much. See you later.